Hey YouTube, how's it going? Dustin Smith here with A2K, Allegiance to the King, and today is Friday, and Friday means that we're doing another video on responsibly reading the book of Revelation, okay? Hopefully you've been keeping up in our series on responsibly reading the book of Revelation. We've been looking in the past 2 weeks at the various reasons as to why the book of Revelation was originally written, okay? And once we get a grasp on why a book was written, that actually tells us a lot about the contents of this particular book, okay? So 2 weeks ago, we looked at one of the reasons why the book of Revelation was written, and that was because the 7 churches in Asia Minor that are listed in Revelation chapters 2 through 3 were suffering persecution, and the book wanted to encourage them in the midst of their persecution, okay? Last week, we looked at another reason why the book of Revelation was written, and that was that many people in those churches were deciding to compromise with the culture around them and compromise their faithful witness of Christ to the world. And so the book was encouraging them to not compromise, but to stand and be faithful witnesses for Jesus in the midst of fallen Babylon, okay? So today we're going to look at a third reason as to why the book of Revelation was written. We're going to look at the subject of nonviolent resistance or nonviolent endurance, okay? And so we're going to look at a few passages that talk about this, because when a religious group is actually suffering, okay, their responses could be all over the spectrum, okay? On one extreme, a group of persecuted religious people could respond to persecution by just giving up the faith, by compromising with the culture, and just ceasing to be their religious entity, okay? That is one extreme that the book of Revelation is trying to discourage. It does not want its believers to give up their witness of Christ. It does not want its readers to give up and to compromise with the culture, okay? That's one extreme. Another extreme, on the other end, is to resist the persecution violently, as in taking up weapons, taking up arms, taking up swords, and responding to the persecution with violence, with bloodshed, and with war, okay? That's another extreme that we're going to look at today that the book of Revelation is deeply trying to discourage, primarily because it's trying to get its readers to imitate the Lamb. To imitate the Lamb that was crucified and the Lamb that was slaughtered. And we all know from the stories of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, is that Jesus died as a faithful martyr, as someone who did not respond with violence, okay? In order to be a martyr, you have to be someone who dies non-violently, okay? And so the book of Revelation, what we're going to look at today, is that it's trying to encourage not the readers to compromise with the culture, to give up the faith in one extreme, and not to respond with violent resistance, but the middle ground of maintaining their faith, not compromising, and resisting nonviolently. And they resist nonviolently by enduring, by persevering, and continuing to be faithful, even if it means that they have to suffer a martyr's death, okay? So let's look at some passages that talk about this. We're going to look at Revelation chapter 2, verses 9 through 10, where Jesus says, I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the blasphemy or the slander by those who say that they are Jews but are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days, okay? So this church is told that they're being slandered, they're being blasphemed by a variety of Jews, and that this Satan figure is about to cast a handful of them, some of them, into prison, and they're going to be tested, they're going to be tortured, okay? And they're going to have tribulation for a short period, for a period of 10 days, okay? Now notice how Jesus teaches them in the very next command as to how they're supposed to respond when this happens, okay? When they get thrown into prison wrongfully, because there's no indication here that the believers in Smyrna are being thrown into prison because they're lawbreakers or because they're criminals or because they're thieves, okay? They're being thrown into prison because they're having a faithful witness and they're being slandered by Jews for not worshiping the emperor or worshiping the Roman Empire and compromising with the culture. There's a lot of background that's going on there. But notice here at the end of verse 10 how Jesus tells them that they're supposed to respond. He says, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Okay? His response there is that when you're going through trial, when you're being thrown into prison, when you're being tested, when you're being tortured, your response is faithfulness. And faithfulness, even if it means costing you your life. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. And that is an example that follows the life of Jesus, who himself was faithful even to the point of death. And of course, God resurrected him to life. And of course, that's what Jesus is telling them here. Okay? So notice he does not tell them that when these things happen, when they're wrongfully put into prison, that they're to respond with violence. No, they're to respond with a nonviolent endurance, a nonviolent faithfulness, even leading to their death as a martyr. Okay? We're going to look at the next passage is in chapter 2 and verse 13. This is where Jesus is speaking to the church in Pergamum, and he says this, I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. Okay? Jesus here praises the church because there was a time when there was a guy in their church named Antipas, and he is called here Jesus' witness, Jesus' faithful one. The word here for witness in Greek is the word martis. It's the word we get the word martyr. Okay? So here, this guy Antipas is called by Jesus his faithful martyr. All right? And the same phrase, which is my witness, my faithful one, is used of Jesus earlier in the book of Revelation in chapter 1 and verse 5. He is called the faithful witness, the faithful martyr. Okay? So since Antipas here is given the same designation that Jesus was earlier, it goes to stand that he probably died in a similar way that Jesus died. As a faithful witness to the gospel, he died as a martyr for evangelizing the Christian message. And of course, this is why Jesus can say to them that he is aware of the fact they hold fast to his name and they did not deny Jesus' faith during this time when Antipas was martyred. Okay? Notice here, Antipas was martyred as someone who was faithful, okay? And you can't be a martyr if you respond to that persecution that leads to your death with violence, okay? That's not how the Bible describes martyrdom, all right? So here Jesus praises this church because of this individual who demonstrated nonviolent endurance. He demonstrated nonviolent perseverance. He continued to be a faithful witness even until his death. And he praises this church because of his witness and his example, and he hopes that that example is going to continue to build up and serve as an example for the church, both in the first century and on for further readers throughout the last 2,000 years. Okay? Let's move ahead in chapter 12 and verse 11. Chapter 12 and verse 11 says this, and they overcame him. They conquered the dragon because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. And here's the important part. They did not love their life even when faced with death. I'm going to say that again. They did not love their life even when faced with death. Okay? They were willing to be faithful, to endure, and to persevere even to the point of death, even to the point of their martyrdom. And this is how they conquer the dragon. This is how they defeat the devil. They don't defeat the devil with armed violence. They don't defeat the devil with weapons. No, they defeat the devil because of Jesus' own sacrifice and the victory that he won with his death. With the word of their testimony, they defeat him with the gospel message that they're preaching in their resistance that is nonviolent, and by not loving and cherishing their life even when faced with death. They did not think that this life was so important that they needed to save it and to rescue it by any means necessary, either by compromising on one extreme or by saving it through a violent means and bloodshed and responding with the sword on the other extreme. No, they did not love their life even when faced with death. They demonstrated nonviolent endurance, nonviolent resistance, and some of these people died as a martyr because of that. One last passage we're going to look at, chapter 14 in verse 12, another place that defines perseverance, steadfastness, endurance, nonviolent endurance. 14 in verse 12 says this, here is the perseverance of the saints. Okay, so I want to know, how do God's people, how do the saints persevere, endure, and demonstrate steadfastness? How do they do this? They keep the commandments of God and the faithfulness of Jesus. Okay, They keep the commandments of God and the faithfulness of Jesus. This is how they endure. Notice they don't endure by compromising and giving up the commands of God, and they ignore Jesus' example of demonstrating faithfulness in his entire life that led to his death as a faithful martyr. Okay? They also don't demonstrate perseverance by responding with violence. Okay? They demonstrate perseverance here. The perseverance of the saints is described as people who continue to keep God's teachings, God's commandments, and the faithfulness of Jesus. Jesus demonstrates in his life his own faithfulness as someone who continues to preach the gospel, is always obedient to God, and maintains his faithfulness and his allegiance, even if it costs him his life. And that example is put here as what should define the perseverance of the saints. Okay? So folks, hopefully this has helped you in understanding a little bit more about the book of Revelation, specifically that it calls for what seems to be in our culture today a very high standard of allegiance to the king, and that allegiance to the king, according to the book of Revelation, means to be faithful and to endure and to persevere without responding in violence, even if it costs someone their life as a martyr. Because the victory has already been won, Christ has been raised from the dead, and the promises that God is going to, through Christ, raise those who are faithful when Jesus comes back to consummate the kingdom on this earth. Okay? Be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more videos from Allegiance to the King, and stay tuned for more videos on responsibly reading the book of Revelation. My name is Dustin Smith. I'm with A2K, and until next time, take care.